The lights inside the arena burned bright, casting a golden glow over the ring, as the crowd settled into an uneasy anticipation. This was not just another fight on the card. It was a clash of generations, a collision of youth and experience that had the boxing world quietly intrigued. In one corner stood Khalidov Murad, a 36-year-old Russian veteran wrapped in white trunks, a man with 10 victories and 10 undefeated memories behind him. Yet those memories were old, very old. His last appearance in a professional ring had come more than a decade earlier, back in 2014. Since then, the gloves had gathered dust, the roar of the crowd had faded into distant echoes, and many believed his career had quietly slipped into history. But tonight, under these unforgiving lights, Khalidov had returned. Across the ring stood the future, Khalimjon Mamasoliev of Uzbekistan. Only 18 years old, yet already decorated with youth championships across Asia and the world, he carried the confidence of a rising prodigy. 2 professional fights, 2 victories, and both delivered with authority. Where Khalidov brought seasoned strength, Mamasoliev brought speed, ambition, and the fearless energy of youth. The physical contrast between them told its own story. Khalidov, heavier by more than 13 kilograms, carried the build of a full-grown heavyweight, powerful and sturdy. Mamasoliev, lean and still developing, looked like a young fighter still growing into his man strength. But sometimes youth carries its own power, the relentless engine of stamina, the refusal to slow down. As the referee called both men to the center for final instructions, the tension thickened. One fighter was attempting to reclaim relevance after 10 years away. The other was trying to prove he belonged among professionals, despite barely being old enough to buy a drink in most countries. The bell was about to ring, and the question hanging over the arena was simple. Would experience and strength prevail, or would youth and hunger write the next chapter of boxing's endless story? The opening bell echoed through the arena, and immediately the contrast between the fighters became visible. Khalidov moved with the patience of a veteran who had seen many rounds in his life, his gloves held high, his stance calm and measured. Across from him, Mamasoliev bounced lightly on his feet, shoulders relaxed but eyes sharp, studying every movement of the older man. The first round unfolded like a chess match, each fighter probing with cautious jabs rather than reckless aggression. Khalidov extended his lead hand first, testing the distance, while Mamasoliev responded with quick, sharp counters aimed at the body. A neat left hand to the midsection from the young Uzbek landed early, drawing murmurs from the crowd. It wasn't a damaging punch, but it showed intent. Mamasoliev was not intimidated by the older fighter's size or reputation. Instead, he looked comfortable, almost eager, as he tried to establish rhythm. Khalidov, meanwhile, seemed content to absorb information. His punches were slower, but heavier, and when they brushed against Mamasoliev's guard, you could hear the thudding weight behind them. Still, neither fighter truly committed to anything dangerous during those opening minutes. They remained within punching range, trading small bursts of offense, yet the punches mostly grazed gloves and shoulders, rather than landing flush. The crowd sensed the tension building beneath the surface. This was the feeling out stage, the calm before the storm. As the round edged toward its final seconds, Mamasoliev attempted a quick combination near the belt line, snapping 2 punches that landed lightly. Khalidov responded with a subtle gesture, almost dismissive, before resetting his stance. The bell rang soon after, ending a round that offered hints of what might come but no clear advantage. Both fighters had found their range, both had tasted contact, and now the real battle was about to begin. The second round began with a noticeable shift in energy. The cautious distance of the opening minutes disappeared, as both fighters stepped slightly closer, planting their feet with more conviction. Suddenly the punches carried greater weight, and the exchanges grew sharper. Khalidov, sensing an opportunity to use his natural strength, began pressing forward behind a deliberate jab. One of those jabs clipped Mamasoliev's chin, drawing a quick reaction from the teenager who immediately fired back with a right hand. The tempo of the fight accelerated. Mamasoliev continued targeting the body, dipping slightly before delivering compact hooks that thudded against Khalidov's ribs. It was a smart strategy, attack the heavier man downstairs, and slowly drain his stamina. But Khalidov answered with authority. Using a clever feint, he flicked a decoy left hand before bending his knees and driving a solid punch into the body of his own. Moments later, a short right uppercut slipped through the guard and reminded everyone in the arena that the veteran still possessed dangerous power. The crowd could feel the difference now. These were no longer exploratory touches, these were real punches with real intent. Mamasoliev remained brave, refusing to retreat, but each time Khalidov's heavier shots landed, they produced a visible jolt, even when partially blocked. The younger fighter worked hard, throwing combinations in bursts, and trying to overwhelm the veteran with activity. Yet Khalidov's experience showed through his timing. Near the end of the round, he delivered a clever right hand that curved around Mamasoliev's elbow, an eye-catching strike that drew cheers from ringside. The bell ended a fiercely competitive round, one where youth and work rate clashed with strength and precision. The fight was beginning to find its identity, and it was becoming clear that neither man intended to back down. Round 3 unfolded with intensity that mirrored the growing urgency of the contest. Khalidov had discovered his rhythm now, stalking forward with calculated pressure, his heavier frame edging closer with every exchange. Yet Mamasoliev refused to be bullied. The young Uzbek increased his output dramatically, unleashing combinations that snapped through the air in rapid succession. While many of his punches lacked the crushing power of Khalidov's shots, they carried something equally important: momentum. Midway through the round, Mamasoliev delivered a crisp left hand followed by a straight right that pushed the Russian veteran backward for the first time in the fight. The crowd responded instantly, sensing a shift in energy. The teenager had raised the tempo, forcing the older fighter into a pace that could become uncomfortable. But Khalidov answered with the calm of experience. Planting his feet firmly, he launched a 3-punch combination that ended with a thudding right hand, sneaking around the guard. It wasn't enough to stop Mamasoliev, but the impact was clear. The difference in punching power was undeniable. Still, the younger man continued pressing, working tirelessly in the second half of the round. His uppercuts and straight rights began finding openings, and for a moment, it seemed as if youth and stamina might overwhelm the returning veteran. The arena buzzed as both fighters traded in the center of the ring, neither willing to surrender ground. By the time the bell rang, both men had delivered their strongest effort so far. Khalidov had the heavier artillery, but Mamasoliev had proven he could push the pace and compete with heart. The fight had evolved from cautious probing into a true battle of wills. As the 4th round began, the contest entered its second half, and with it came the question every observer was asking: who would endure the distance better? Khalidov had the experience and physical strength, but he also carried the burden of a decade away from competition. Mamasoliev had youth and conditioning on his side, yet he had never fought beyond short bouts early in his career. The round opened with both men trading jabs in the center, each looking for the slightest opening. Khalidov attempted to assert control by pressing forward, occasionally trying to arc his right hand over the top of Mamasoliev's guard. The Uzbek fighter, however, relied on movement and quick combinations to disrupt the veteran's rhythm. There were moments where their heads came close together on the inside, prompting Khalidov to briefly signal the referee after a suspected clash, but the fight continued without interruption. The exchanges remained close and competitive. Khalidov's punches still carried the heavier impact, producing subtle reactions when they landed. Yet Mamasoliev kept himself busy, firing quick 1-2 combinations and refusing to allow the veteran time to rest. The crowd sensed how narrow the margin between them had become. Each round felt like a small battle that could tip the entire outcome of the fight. By the closing seconds of the fourth, both fighters showed signs of fatigue, creeping into their movements. The pace slowed slightly, but the tension increased. Neither man had established clear dominance. Instead, they stood locked in a strategic struggle, where every punch mattered and every moment of hesitation could shift the balance. The fifth round brought a subtle but important shift in the momentum of the fight. Khalidov, perhaps sensing the urgency of the scorecards, began pushing forward with greater determination. He maneuvered Mamasoliev toward the ropes on several occasions, looking to unleash the heavier punches that had troubled the younger man earlier. Yet sometimes he hesitated, pausing just long enough for the opportunity to slip away. When he finally let his hands go, the effect was clear. Solid jabs and short hooks that thudded through partial defenses and forced Mamasoliev to respond quickly. The Uzbek fighter's strategy now seemed focused on survival and activity, rather than damage. His punches continued to fly, but many were designed to keep Khalidov occupied, rather than hurt him. The energy of youth was still present, but the strain of the fight had begun to show. His movements looked slightly slower, his combinations less explosive. Khalidov recognized it, and tried to capitalize, stepping forward during the closing seconds of the round, with the look of a man searching for a decisive moment. Yet Mamasoliev's courage never wavered. Even when tired, he answered every advance with something: jab, cross, hook, anything to prevent the veteran from overwhelming him completely. The crowd appreciated the effort from both fighters. This had become a gritty, determined contest, where skill mixed with pure heart. As the bell ended the fifth round, it was clear that the fight would be decided in the final 3 minutes. The sixth and final round began with a sense of urgency hanging over the ring. Both fighters knew the fight remained close, and both understood that these final moments could shape the judge's decision. Mamasoliev even switched briefly into a southpaw stance, hoping to present a new challenge for the veteran. But Khalidov looked confident now, as if the rhythm of competition had finally returned to him after years away. He landed a clean straight punch early in the round, followed moments later by a sharp uppercut that snapped Mamasoliev's head upward. The younger fighter kept throwing, but the intention had changed. His punches were no longer aimed at winning the fight. They were meant to keep Khalidov from closing in too aggressively. Meanwhile, the Russian veteran continued pressing forward, sensing that the fight might belong to him if he finished strongly. Another uppercut slipped through the guard, followed by a body shot that echoed audibly around the arena. The fatigue in Mamasoliev's movements was now unmistakable, though his determination never faded. Even in the final minute, he continued working, throwing punches, and refusing to surrender the center of the ring. The crowd applauded the effort as the fighters exchanged their last combinations of the night. 10 seconds remained. Both men stood within striking range, trading blows in a final burst of pride and resilience. Then the bell rang, ending 18 hard-fought minutes. When the fight ended, both men lowered their gloves and allowed the tension to drain from their shoulders. Khalidov spread his arms wide, breathing deeply, the relief of survival visible on his face. Across from him, Mamasoliev leaned slightly forward, clearly exhausted but still proud of the effort he had given. The crowd applauded respectfully. This had not been a one-sided contest. It had been a genuine test for both fighters. As they waited for the official decision, analysts and spectators debated quietly. Mamasoliev had thrown more punches and maintained a high tempo for much of the fight. Yet Khalidov's shots had carried the heavier authority, often producing the more noticeable reactions. Finally, the fighters were called to the center of the ring. The announcer lifted the microphone, the arena falling silent for the verdict. The scorecards were read, and the result was announced. A unanimous decision victory for Khalidov Murad. The veteran had returned after more than 10 years away from professional boxing and secured a win against a young, ambitious opponent. For Khalidov, it was a triumphant comeback, proof that experience and strength could still shine, even after a long absence. For Mamasoliev, the defeat carried a different meaning. At just 18 years old, he had faced a stronger, heavier, and far more experienced opponent, and pushed him through a demanding 6 rounds. Losses like this do not destroy careers, they build them. And as the fighters left the ring that night, one thing was certain. The veteran had reclaimed a moment of glory, while the journey ahead for Mamasoliev was only just beginning.